Eventually, the housing market will improve. But when? We're hoping that Barbara Corcoran has the answer to that question. She's the founder of a multi-billion-dollar real estate business and is here to shed some light on what's happening in the housing market. Barbara, thanks for joining us.
Good morning. I hope you're not going to ask me that question.
Well, let's start instead with just a few adjectives. How would you describe the housing market right now?
Okay, well, first I'd have to say tragic. Tragic in that it's a shame that it went this far without anybody thinking of a cure to turn it around. Nobody has. I don't think there's anything on the horizon. Basically tragic. Also, I would say confused. Every time a new report comes out, it gives you different numbers in the report before it and just serves to confuse people even farther. Or further, whatever's correct.
Well, speaking of that, mortgages obviously are at an all-time low, but we just heard that in May it fell even farther, the real estate market. So it's a great time to be a buyer. It's a buyer's market, and yet that's the definition of a buyer's market. No one's buying. Why not?
Well, there's something odd happens in real estate and probably any kind of sales. Nobody wants what nobody wants, and everybody wants what everybody wants. Any buyer in the world is happier standing in a line and having to overbid another buyer to get the house they want than to wonder why nobody else is at the open house.
It's just like the stock market.
It's definitely. So it's a herd mentality without a doubt. And what you have now here is really, you have the good old days that we were all talking about for 20 years. We're back to the good old days. You have cheap money at 4.5% for a fixed rate mortgage, and you have cheap prices at a 40% lower than they've ever been before. And yet people are still afraid to buy because they want to buy in a crowd. It's as simple as that.
So speaking of mortgages, obviously it's a great deal right now, but it is harder to get a mortgage. Is that really hurting the market, or is it just we're back to normalcy where you actually have to have an income to get a mortgage?
No, it's not anything near what we used to think of as normalcy. It's a new normalcy. A full third of all the buyers in the last 6 months were all cash buyers. If you've got the bucks in your pocket, no problem with the banks. But if you don't, if you're a first-time buyer or you're upgrading your third home with great credit, you're still going to jump through the hoops to get the money. But it's there, and once you get it, remember, the prize there is it's cheap. It's 4.5%.
I realize that predicting markets is a dangerous game, but
it's nutsy. It's beyond dangerous.
Let's do it anyway, just for fun. Do you think that prices keep on falling from here?
You know what? I don't think people are aware that a lot of prices are not falling. Almost 20% of all the U.S. markets have already turned around and are going up in price. Even places like Nevada that people think, oh my God, that's the worst. It was the worst hit, but that's even turning around. So it depends entirely where you live. But what happens in headlines is the negative news grabs the headline, but nobody's talking about the 20% of the markets, despite all odds, have turned around and are appreciating in price.
So in terms of, you say people only want to buy when they're going up. What markets are going up other than Nevada where people might want to buy?
Some of the worst hit markets, Detroit, where you could usually buy a home cheaper than you could buy a car. I mean, yet still no one was buying. But what started that market were investors, okay? Las Vegas, the worst hit market with the most development in the entire nation. Prices are already moving up there when people said they would never move up, and there's a foreclosure on every third block, and still they're moving up. So some of the worst, earliest hit markets are moving up. Sacramento, California, another hard hit market, prices are moving up. San Francisco, prices are starting to go through the roof. San Francisco, that everybody said wouldn't recover only 2 years ago. So the idea here is you focus on your local market and see what's going on. If you could take a drive and find that there are less than 3 foreclosure signs within 10 blocks, you ought to be buying. The minute those foreclosure signs start becoming less, you ought to be buying yesterday. So you have to watch your local market.
So what would, other than foreclosures, are there any other things that people ought to be on the lookout for to say, hey, the market's turning around in my neck of the woods?
Yeah, you know what turns every market around is young people moving in. Not the old folks who are saying it will never recover, but the young people moving in. You should drive through an area and look for new, cheap cars. Brand new cheap cars, because if you're seeing them on the street, the fact of the matter is young people are moving in, the schools get more crowded, they're getting better teachers, and everything takes care of itself. The other thing you want to do is look at SAT scores. If SAT scores are going up in any local area, you can bet your bottom dollar that prices are starting to go up there as well. I know they're a little offbeat things, but at least you get the edge on the next guy, so you're not in the crowd with everybody else overbidding a price 2 years from now because you missed the whole thing.
So if I am a buyer right now, obviously I've got the advantage in some ways. What's your best advice for a buyer?
For a buyer, Don't wait. Everybody thinks they want to time the market. They want to sharpshoot the market and buy right at the bottom. But the truth of the matter is nobody's good at it. I've been in real estate my whole life. I've been trying to sharpshoot the market with my investments. I'm never right. But all you need to do is get near the bottom. And what we are now for sure that no one will dispute is we're near the bottom. And that's good enough, because if you wait, the funny thing happens in real estate. It's slow to unwind, but when it recovers, it comes out back up like gangbusters. And you really can catch up to it, and you're already in the mess of overbidding the next guy. You can't wait.
So final bit of advice for the seller. It's a little tougher there. What should a seller do right now?
Realize you're in a beauty competition. You've got to make your home compete with the neighbor you used to love. You should think of them as the enemy. If you can make your house look better than them and price it just a hair below what the next guy is asking, you're going to find a buyer, because houses are indeed selling. It's just a matter of getting your razor edge on your house so that you are the first one to be picked and bid on.
Great advice, Barbara. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're easy, but thank you for not having me predict anything. It's such nonsense.
Thanks very much for watching.